She wrote, "Pretend you're sick and leave." 10 minutes later, an amazing truth was revealed. Sarah leaned against the nurse's station, her fingers tapping nervously against the counter. "Pretend you're sick and leave," she scribbled in a hasty note to her best friend, Kayla. It was a playful jest amidst the chaos of the local hospital where she worked, yet the words pierced her with a bittersweet reality. The weight of each day felt heavier, her empathy was often overshadowed by the relentless demands of a staff stretched thin. How many people did she tend to who barely acknowledged her exhaustion? The ache of invisibility gnawed at her. As Kayla's bright smile flashed in the doorway, she scribbled on the slip of paper meant to lighten the moment. "I'm off." Kayla called cheerfully, her laughter fading into the chaos of the ward. Sarah was left alone in the hustle, an unease creeping in like an unwelcome fog. She picked up the next chart, dread settling into her gut. Fear of abandonment gripped her. Their long shifts together were her only relief from the mounting pressure. Now, she was adrift. Hours later, as the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, a restless energy pulsed through the corridors. Leaning over an elderly patient named Mr. Thompson, Sarah listened to the stories of his youth. He spoke of a world where dreams seemed attainable, but the moment he mentioned her grandmother, an unexpected current jolted through her. "She was remarkable, you know," he said, his voice low, eyes glinting with nostalgia. "Had a research facility that could be changed everything." Her heart raced. There was something alive in the air, memories entwined with secrets. "Research facility?" she echoed, unsure, her curiosity piqued. How could she have not known this? The words felt like shards cutting through her carefully constructed reality. Mr. Thompson nodded, his expression simultaneously somber and vibrant. It was lost to time and prejudice. Those in power took it from her family. "Your family." Her breath quickened. Stress and disbelief twisted inside her. Could the very foundation of her identity have been stripped away, buried underneath the weight of history? This was more than a whisper of the past, this was a legacy, a dormant fire waiting to be reignited. But to fight for it? The thought paralyzed her. What if she failed? What if she couldn't reclaim what was lost, or worse, what if the community turned against her? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. She stood frozen, hands shaking slightly, the weight of moral uncertainty clawing at her soul. Was she meant to honor her grandmother's silence, or was it time to speak the truth? The hospital felt stifling, a microcosm of a world ready to dismiss her. Whispers of corporate interests danced in her mind, threatening a future that was already fogged with doubt. As she prepared to return to her duties, a wave of determination washed over her. No matter how small a chance, she needed to uncover the truth. But the echoes of resistance loomed large and heavy. The thought of standing before the town council, pouring out the legacy of her family, felt terrifying and exhilarating. Could she confront both society's reluctance and her own failures? And as she turned to face the world waiting outside the hospital doors, the space seemed charged with an electric tension, each moment spiraling toward an uncertain climax. Would she gather the strength to fight, or would fear silence her voice forever? The questions hung in the air, looming larger than life, leaving Sarah at a crossroads, aching for closure. That slipped just beyond her grasp. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her, a reminder of the weight of the day as Sarah stepped onto the bustling hospital floor. Each face she encountered blurred into the next, their whispers blending with the rapid beeping of machines. Somewhere behind that indifferent noise lay the urgency she had felt earlier, a wake-up call demanding she confront her grandmother's story. Suddenly, the routine felt insufferably ordinary. She moved through her responsibilities, yet her mind drifted toward the revelations from Mr. Thompson. Memories of her grandmother's warm laughter, the smell of fresh coffee wafting through her family home, flickered in her consciousness, accompanied now by a sense of betrayal. How could she have been unaware of such a monumental part of her legacy? The dissonance of ignorance clashed violently with the seeds of purpose now germinating in her mind. The incessant chatter around her faded as she clutched the chart with a newfound urgency. If reclaiming that legacy meant fighting against a history that sought to marginalize her family, then that fight had to start with her. Perhaps the hospital had conditioned her to think of others first, but in this moment, she realized that advocating for her truth wasn't an act of selfishness, it was a necessity. Her first task was simple, yet remarkably heavy. The town council meeting was on the horizon. She imagined herself standing at the front, words poised on the edge of her tongue, ready to reclaim what had been ripped from her. As her shift continued, doubt twisted like a knife in her gut, but it was coupled with a flame of determination that would not be snuffed out. Days passed, and the deadline loomed. Each evening, Sarah plunged into research, scouring for any breadcrumbs left behind by the years. Spidery archives, half-rumored whispers, and grainy photographs began to unveil a narrative that felt like an echo of her very being. The more she unearthed, the heavier the burden grew, with each discovery balancing precariously alongside her anxieties. Yet, in the flickering shadows of sleepless nights, moments of clarity arose, discoveries about herself that intertwined with her grandmother's tale. She began writing, her thoughts brimming with raw energy spilled onto the pages, shaping a narrative that felt undeniably true. As she pressed pen to paper, the words morphed into something tangible, a bridge between her past and present, an anchor against the tide of uncertainty. Facing her reflection one night, she noticed the grit in her eyes. Behind the familiar gaze lay an unyielding spirit strength she had previously overlooked. For the first time, Sarah began to see that her identity was not just anchored in the fleeting moments at work but in the legacy she could resurrect. And yet, self-doubt persisted, whispering cruelly about what lay ahead. The voices of those who would dismiss her echoed in her mind as she envisioned stepping onto that council stage. The world remained saturated with opinions, but wasn't it her right to own her family's legacy? Shivers coursed through her as she stood at the precipice of this new venture, feeling the gravity of her choices tugging at her. Should she push through the fear and claim her space in the narrative of her family? In that moment of intense self-awareness, Sarah knew the fight was no longer just about reclaiming a lost legacy, it was about claiming herself. But as the day approached, Sarah's resolve began to waver. A storm brewed within her, promising an undeniable confrontation with the town council, her family's history and herself. Would the truth fuel her courage, or would the fear of the unknown overwhelm her? The time had come for her to mobilize, her heritage now hung in the balance. She would soon face those who would either rally behind her or challenge her every word. The moment of confrontation loomed closer, the tension tightening around her like a vice. Could she rise to meet this challenge, or would she risk losing everything she had finally beginning to own? Panic threatened to envelop Sarah as the day of the town council meeting approached. The echo of hopeful moments she'd envisioned while researching her grandmother's legacy now felt indistinguishable from the cacophony of doubts crashing through her mind. The space in her chest twisted tight, an aching knot that felt almost impossibly heavy. She fumbled with the stack of research papers on her dining table, the dim light casting shadows over facts and photographs that had joined her on this journey. Every statistic she recalled, every piece of her grandmother's story she had unearthed, transformed from points of reference into confounding symbols of pressure. What if she stood before them and faltered, grasping unsuccessfully for coherent words? What if the council's collective gaze turned cold, filled with skepticism rather than support? Would she be met with silence or ridicule? The stakes loomed before her like menacing giants, and for a moment, she wished she could retreat into the anonymity of her hospital scrubs. But then, just as quickly as the wave of uncertainty rolled in, a fire ignited within her. The countless hours she had spent poring over every detail of her grandmother's life urged her forward. Each paragraph she had written served not just as history but testimony, an assertion that this legacy mattered deeply both to her and to others who had shared similar stories but had been hushed by time. As the afternoon slipped into evening, Sarah prepared for the moment when she would claim her narrative. She donned a new outfit, something professional yet easy to move in, a neutral palette that was both comforting and empowering. She glanced in the mirror. The familiar person looking back wore remnants of doubt, but they were intermingled with a steel resolve she hadn't known she could muster just weeks before. This development of self-awareness had been agonizing yet transformative, like forging metal in fire. Arriving at the town hall, she felt a relentless thrum of her heartbeat echo in her ears. The wooden doors loomed ahead, almost daunting and resplendent in their simplicity. With a deep breath, she stepped inside, gripping her folder tightly against her chest. The expansive hall filled with murmurings from the gathered audience, a sea of faces that felt both supportive and hostile all at once. Taking her place behind the podium, Sarah looked out at the skeptical faces of the council members and the attentive eyes from behind them. An apprehensive silence hung in the air, still and dense, an invitation and a challenge all at once. Something within her shifted, a strong current surged through her. This was her moment, one that would either solidify her voice or stifle it into a whisper. "Today I stand before you," she began, her voice steadier than she anticipated, "to reclaim a story that holds not just personal significance but a communal one. It's not just my grandmother's history, but a lineage that deserves recognition and honor." Each word felt more potent than the last, a thread weaving her narrative into the fabric of the audience's consciousness. Her heart raced with the challenge, emotions flaring as she poured out the accounts, the injustices faced, and the depth of her family's ties to the community. The council members shifted, unease creeping into their expressions, yet she noted some nodding, others visibly intrigued. With every piece she revealed, it was as if she was chipping away at a wall built by years of neglect. Every story shared not only honored her grandmother but also peeled back layers of her own doubt. The initial nervousness began to dissolve, transforming into a fierce energy, as if she was reclaiming fragments of herself along with her heritage. But just as she reached the crescendo of her argument, a familiar voice emerged from the crowd, an entity of doubt cloaked in authority. The mayor, a figure known for his dismissive attitude toward the past, stood to interject. "And why should we care about this legacy? It's history. Doesn't it matter to us today?" A wave of anxiety crashed over her again. How could she respond to such dismissal? In that moment, the weight of her grandmother's story collided with the skepticism of the present. The challenge hung before her, threatening to undo everything she had fought for. Could she confront him effectively and prove that her family's history had the power to shape a brighter future? As uncertainty flooded her mind once more, she realized the gravity of her resolve lay not just in reclaiming a legacy but in navigating the fraught terrain of her own confidence. The weight of her choice clung to the air as she prepared for the confrontation that could either silence her or reinstate her truth. The atmosphere in the hall turned electric, the air thick with anticipation as Sarah squared her shoulders, her heart pounding in her ears. The mayor's interruption resonated like a thunderclap, a direct challenge to everything she had fought to articulate. She drew a deep breath, feeling the heat of the moment wash over her. This wasn't merely a defense of her grandmother's legacy, it was a test of her newfound voice, a declaration of who she was becoming. "History is not just the past, it is the foundation upon which we build our future," she countered, her voice sharper now, slicing through the tension that had settled in the room. "It shapes our values, our community, and our identity. Ignoring it does not erase its impact, it only allows the lessons of those who came before us to fade into obscurity." She could hardly believe the confidence surging through her, this fierce determination to stand her ground manifesting as a lucid clarity in her mind. As she looked around the chamber, Sarah caught glimpses of the faces in the crowd, a mosaic of reactions. Some council members had tightened their expressions, while others appeared to be considering her words, weighing the truth that carried weight beyond their skepticism. At that moment, she realized that her fear had been her own prison. No more. The power of her voice stemmed not from a lack of fear but from her audacity to confront it head-on. "Your dismissal of my grandmother's story is a dismissal of all the stories like hers, those of struggle, resilience, and hope. Ignoring this legacy means dismissing the very fabric that connects us as a community," she continued, her tone firm yet reflective, urging the audience to engage with her argument. The back and forth of ideas had to go beyond mere politics, it had to resonate on a human level. The mayor's brows furrowed deeper as he grappled with her assertion, but before he could respond, she pressed on. "I am not here to romanticize the past, but to highlight its relevance today. By acknowledging histories like my grandmother's, we can literally reshape our community and learn from the past." She took a moment to let that sit with them, knowing full well the weight of her words. Sarah's thoughts began to spiral into deeper reflection as she spoke. She realized she wasn't just delivering a story, she was initiating a reckoning within herself. Every moment spent in this endeavor had been about understanding her roots, her family's struggles, and her own vulnerabilities. The journey had unfolded layers of her identity that had long remained dormant. At that moment, something shifted inside her. It was as if a dam had broken, illuminating the connection between her past and her present with stark clarity. She understood now that she was not merely speaking on behalf of her grandmother, she was defending herself, advocating for the girl who had felt lost in her shadow for so long. She had become the voice not just of history but also of her own evolution. As she sensed the growing curiosity behind the skeptical gazes, doubt began to fade into the background, replaced by a burgeoning sense of agency. Stories matter. They challenge us to think critically, to empathize, to grow. This is not just about honoring a legacy, it's about nurturing an understanding that will ensure we do not repeat the mistakes that led to suffering, Sarah concluded, sat firmly in her narrative, aware that the journey into this exploration was just beginning. Just then, the room remained silent, her words hanging thick in the air. She could see the council members furtively sharing glances, an unspoken dialogue simmering beneath the surface. Then, cutting through the silence, the mayor finally spoke, but his voice held an undertone of uncertainty now. What makes you think the town can change? What proof do you have that this legacy can catalyze anything meaningful today? A pulse of apprehension raced through Sarah, but it only fueled the fire inside her. This was her moment for transparency, to summon every ounce of her courage. Because, she asserted, her voice rising with conviction, change begins with acknowledgement. It starts with a single story that prompts others to reflect on their own narratives. And I know of several people whose lives were impacted by her. Would you give me the chance to share them? The tension was palpable, each word an invitation for dialogue yet a demand for recognition, a chance for her to expose the crux of her argument and invite the council to join her in a deeper conversation about history. The room held its breath, the tipping point unfolding around them, a fork in the road awaited her. Would she succeed in opening a door to the past that offered a glimpse into a transformed future? The mayor's gaze bore into her, but his response was yet to come, forcing Sarah to question whether this might be the moment that would define not only her legacy but her very identity. Sarah's heart thudded against her ribcage as the mayor's silence stretched, the weight of the collective gaze pressing down on her. This was not merely a trial of words, it was a crucible of her self-worth and resolve. She could feel every heartbeat, every doubt swirling in her mind, yet there lay an ember of hope igniting within her. The mayor shifted uncomfortably, the unease radiating from him like a palpable force. You want to share their stories? He finally asked, his voice a strained mix of curiosity and disbelief. Yes, Sarah replied, each letter firming her voice. I can tell you first-hand accounts of people who were transformed by my grandmother's legacy. It's not just about the past, it's about understanding how we, as a community, can heal and learn from those experiences. A drift of uncertainty filled the room. This was a gamble, a risk that could solidify her standing as a voice for change or thrust her back into the shadows of doubt. She took a breath, collecting her thoughts like a tapestry woven from myriad threads. Each story she would share was a thread, contributing to the intricate design of transformation she wished to present. Let me tell you about Marcus, she began, feeling the air shift in her voice. He's a local educator who grew up under the weight of not knowing where he belonged. When my grandmother shared her experiences of navigating a similar storm in her youth, Marcus found courage. He saw in her resilience a reflection of his own struggles. Sarah could see the glint of recognition in the eyes of several council members, stirred by the authenticity of her words. By unveiling these stories, she wasn't just honoring her grandmother, she was exposing the roots of her own identity, her capacity to inspire change through vulnerability. With each story, she peeled back layers of herself, revealing not only the narratives that held power but also her role in nurturing those connections. And then there's Leah. There was strength building in her narrative now as she addressed a shared wound. Just like my grandmother, Leah fought against societal constraints. When she learned about the legacy of perseverance that my grandmother embodied, she found her voice through art expressing what many of us often find hard to say aloud. Art as activism, as healing, that is the legacy we can embrace. The atmosphere began to shift once more. Sarah noticed how the eyes of the council members softened as they began connecting the dots between her grandmother's experiences and their own lives, their own histories. It was as if, through Sarah's fervent recounting, a bridge was being constructed to their shared humanity. Yet, as the stories flowed, she felt that familiar pulse of anxiety creeping back, whispering doubts that threatened to derail her newfound confidence. What if they still resisted? Would these anecdotes be enough to persuade them to acknowledge the significance of the past? Each pulse of uncertainty was a whisper of possibility and fear. The mayor leaned forward, clearly impacted by the shift in dynamic. "One more story isn't going to change our minds, Sarah," he said, but there was something different in his tone, less condescension, more intrigued challenge. "What else do you have?" Sarah recognized the subtle invitation cloaked in his words. The pressure was mounting, but now it felt more like a call to arms. It was time to confront the questions that lay beneath, the uncomfortable truths that had been simmering just out of reach. "What we need to explore is not just what was, it's what can be," she declared, her voice cutting through the growing tension anew. "What other stories are out there, waiting to be acknowledged? What legacies can we build upon today? What would it take for us to embrace the future painted by those stories?" With each word, she felt the distance between her fears and her hopes narrowing. This was no longer just about her grandmother or the stories of those she wished to uplift. It was about a reckoning, an imperative to embrace the power of their collective narrative not just as a legacy, but as a blueprint for an uncertain future. Suddenly, she stopped. Was she ready to bear the questions that followed her fears? To confront not just the mayor but the very essence of what held people back from confronting their truths? As she stood, poised at the precipice of this daunting introspection, Sarah understood that she wasn't just defining her legacy, she was challenging the very nature of what it meant to move forward. The room surged with a mix of anticipation and apprehension, the air electric with the potential for transformation or stagnation. It was a moment that could tip the balance into burgeoning possibilities or revisit old shadows. What awaited her in challenging the mayor's authority and the council's beliefs? And could she emerge from this trial with her voice not just intact but amplified? The threshold into that new reality beckoned, waiting to be crossed. The silence lingered in the air, its weight both oppressive and motivating. Sarah's thoughts raced. How had it come to this, her standing before the mayor, feeling exposed yet empowered? The stories of her past were not just tales of community, they were threads intricately woven into her identity, each one revealing facets of bravery she was only beginning to recognize in herself. The council members exchanged furtive glances, their uncertainty laid bare. Sarah felt a rush of determination surge within her as she quelled the whispers of self-doubt. They were not just listening, they were contemplating. This was the spark she had hoped for, an opportunity to ignite their understanding of transformation. She took a steadying breath and pressed on. "I am not just an echo of my grandmother's legacy, I am forging a new narrative," she stated, the words firm on her tongue. "What we share today can guide us toward a future where we do not shy away from uncomfortable truths." Each word fell like a stone into a still pond, rippling outward into the minds of her audience. As she spoke, she began to sense the tentative connections forming between the stories she narrated and the council members seated before her. The mayor's brows furrowed deeper, suggesting an internal grappling with his own perceptions. In her growing courage, Sarah could see the cracks in the facade they had maintained for so long. Their armor was thinning. "What could it mean for each of you?" She pressed further, leaning into the uneasy atmosphere. "To acknowledge not just the failures but the victories of those who came before? How does that empower you in your roles, in your lives? What legacies can you choose to embrace?" The mayor shifted in his seat, visibly torn. She seized the moment, her voice rising with fervor. "When we confront our past, it becomes a tool for progress, not a shackle of despair. It transforms loss into learning, struggle into strength." She could almost hear the gears turning in their minds. Would they wrestle with this idea or would they retreat? There was an undeniable tension now. Sarah could feel every heartbeat, hers and theirs, pulsing in syncopation. It was a dance between uncertain familiarity and undeniable truth. She recalled the struggle of Marcus and Leah, how their stories resounded far beyond what they encapsulated and hinted at a larger potential. In that moment, Sarah recognized the vulnerability that resided in her admissions. Courage didn't mean absence of fear, it was daring to speak despite it. The mayor finally placed his hands on the table, his voice firm yet contemplative. You talk of legacies as if they pulse with life, Sarah. But how do we ensure that they don't merely wither, forgotten in the shadows? His question bore a weight, but rather than feeling intimidated, Sarah felt invigorated. By owning them. By understanding that acknowledging our roots doesn't mean we are bound to them, rather, we have the tools to reshape them. The tension in the room cracked slightly, revealing glimmers of understanding. At that moment, she felt the mantle of her grandmother's spirit wrap around her like a warm embrace. The stories she shared were solutions, blueprints for growth, not scars to bear. Seeing the flicker of recognition in the mayor's eyes encouraged Sarah silently. Perhaps they were on the cusp of a breakthrough, a moment suspended between the fear of change and the allure of hope. Just as her confidence surged again, a council member stood abruptly, a mix of apprehension and curiosity in her gaze. Sarah, while you inspire us to share our stories, there's a concern. What if facing these truths uplifts some yet diminishes others? Can we truly embrace all narratives? The question hung as a new weight tethered her to the moment. Could she or anyone truly embrace the complexity of multiple perspectives? The challenge unveiled another layer of her understanding, and now, it demanded a thoughtful answer. Embracing all narratives is the only way forward, even if it's difficult, Sarah replied, her pulse quickening. It means acknowledging the discomfort and working together through it. It's essential for growth. The room fell silent once more, the air charged with expectation. What would they decide? What would Sarah decide in the face of this confrontation? The true challenge of her journey awaited, and she was prepared to navigate through its complexities. But as they pondered, she couldn't shake the feeling of an impending reckoning that lay just beyond this moment. What truths had she yet to uncover, and how would they reshape her journey moving forward? The light of possibility flickered, revealing paths she had never considered, paths that could redefine everything she thought she knew about herself and her community's story. Sarah's heart raced at the council member's question, her mind awash with possibilities. Could embracing all narratives truly lead to a united path? The very idea felt like an uncharted territory, a terrain laden with unseen pitfalls and promising horizons. She had, until now, operated within the confines of her own story, her grandmother's legacy, her heritage. But standing here, she realized those walls might need to be torn down to forge something broader, something more inclusive. The silence in the room expanded, a palpable tension settling over the council as they wrestled with the implications of her words. Sarah could feel their gazes, a mix of scrutiny and intrigue, weighing her resolve. What came next mattered, there was no room for retreat now. She steadied herself, cultivating the resolve she had drawn from countless late nights spent unraveling her fears and insecurities. What if, she ventured, her voice steadying as she unlocked the power of her thoughts, we accepted that truth is multifaceted? That these narratives we share are like threads in a vast tapestry? Each thread doesn't just exist in isolation, together, they create a more intricate picture. As she spoke, Sarah envisioned not just the stories of her community but how they intertwined, each person carrying a fragment of the truth, each narrative carrying the potential for healing. It struck her that it wasn't merely about recounting history, but reshaping it through dialogue. Those voices needed to be heard, whether they whispered pain or shouted joy. The mayor's expression shifted again, hints of contemplation interwoven with a flicker of resistance. And if some threads are unraveled, what then? Are we prepared for the fallout? The anger, the resentment? Confronted with the reality of his fears, Sarah hesitated. This was bigger than her, yet it still felt intimately personal. It was in that instant, a wave of admiration grew for the council members, their vulnerability echoing her own. She could feel their apprehension. Each historical fracture they might face mirrored her own introspection, moments tremulous yet pregnant with growth. What if we use those threads as a foundation? She proposed, heart racing, the words spilling forth with an impetus she didn't know she possessed. Let us build a bridge. Confronting our past doesn't mean we're agreeing to relive our pain. It means we're prepared to learn, to evolve. But we must invest our energies to ensure those threads are woven in a way that honors everyone's story. The mayor leaned back, the weight of her words settling across the table. Sarah could see him chewing on the ideas, like he was assessing their impact, its potential for both disruption and unification. She could no longer ignore the gnawing worry deep within. What if her approach exposed her to vulnerabilities she didn't yet know existed? A stark realization dawned upon her. She was no longer just exploring her grandmother's legacy, she was now shaping her own. Each word she spoke was building her narrative anew. Yet, the fragility of this moment was a double-edged sword. What if they dismissed her? What if they resisted the change she fervently presented? As she battled these thoughts, a burning sense of responsibility took shape. I'm not here to impose an understanding, she declared, embracing the challenge at hand. But to invite you all to the table of truth. This isn't just about individual narratives, it's about how they can coalesce into a greater understanding. Every thread, good or bad, is necessary in shaping our path forward. In that moment, the room shifted. A few of the council members exchanged looks, recognition, curiosity. Sarah dared to hope it was the stirring of a shared ambition. Yet, as she soulfully locked eyes with the mayor, exhilaration mingled with uncertainty. They stood on the precipice of something. Would they step forward into the unknown alongside her or retreat into the safety of the familiar? Questions buzzed in her mind. Had she truly made the impact she sought, or had she merely stirred the pot without a plan for how it might boil over? There was too much at stake. Too much potential, too many industries and livelihoods hanging precariously in the balance. Time hung in the air, heavy with expectancy. One final thought danced on her mental lips. Can we embrace the narratives that frighten us, as they might hold the keys to transformation? This next act of courage lay ahead of her, but she had to forge through the next layers of doubt and conviction. As she waited for their response, Sarah wondered, could she truly take the mantle of leader, or would the weight of it crush her? The room remained still, charged with an uncertainty that both terrified and excited her. A turning point loomed, but an even larger confrontation awaited. What revelations would emerge from the shadows? The mayor's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, weighing Sarah's proposition like a delicate balance. The silence stretched uncomfortably, but for Sarah, it was a moment of pause that not only felt precarious but also pregnant with potential. Suddenly, he straightened. You're asking us to challenge everything we've held as truth. His words reverberated in the air, bringing forth a mixture of dread and eagerness that she could sense in the council chamber. How do you plan to manage the backlash when we don't have any guarantees that it will lead to goodwill? The question hung heavily in the air, igniting a fire deep within her. Sarah's thoughts raced, her mind mapping out the various directions this conversation could take. Was she merely igniting a discussion, or had she unwittingly sparked a conflict that might endanger her credibility? I understand the risks, she replied, channeling the tension into a confident resolve. But progress never comes without uncertainty. Isn't it worth the effort to explore our shared history, even if it means confronting uncomfortable truths? A few council members shifted in their seats, lending her their ears but still appearing skeptical. She noticed one woman fidgeting with her necklace, an unconscious sign of anxiety. Another councilman leaned back, arms crossed, his gaze a mixture of wariness and intrigue. As Sarah continued, she felt a pulse of urgency. I propose we host a series of forums, open dialogues where our stories can be shared. We listen, we learn, we grow. This isn't just about healing old wounds, it's about creating a shared vision of our community's future. A younger council member leaned forward, a spark of curiosity lighting his eyes. But what happens when those stories clash, Sarah? What if they exacerbate our differences instead of unifying us? This was a pivotal moment. She could either buckle under the weight of scrutiny or cement her place as a leader. That's precisely the point, she asserted, grounding her tone in clarity. We will not shy away from conflict, instead, we'll navigate it. By confronting what divides us, we'll discover the values that bind us together. It's time to view our differences not as barriers, but as avenues for deeper understanding. The murmurs in the room shifted, a tide of engagement rising amidst her passionate delivery. She sensed the council members pondering the implications of her words, the weight of responsibility now palpable. This wasn't just about her vision, it was about theirs, too. As the mayor considered her words, Sarah's gaze moved around the council table. Resolute faces began to emerge, each person seemingly grappling with the potential for transformation. Yet lurking behind each expression was another layer of apprehension, a fear of stepping into the unknown. "Sarah," the mayor finally spoke, his voice firm yet inviting curiosity. "You believe we can engage in such a monumental task? We need a plan, a strategy to face potential pushback. This could fragment relationships that took decades to build." "Then let us prepare for it," she replied, her pulse steadying as her mind clicked into gear. "Allow me to propose working groups focused on developing a framework for these dialogues, what topics to broach, how to manage conversations, and methods of mediation when tensions rise. It's essential we confront our deepest divides, yet we must equip ourselves with the tools to handle the aftermath." The chamber erupted into quiet discussion, her colleagues' voices intertwining as they debated the merits of her proposal. Could she truly guide them as she had once envisioned? Each nod or frown inked their thoughts across her heart, doubt mingling with burgeoning hope. "Your fervor is commendable," the mayor finally said, and Sarah caught a hint of a smile breaking through his stoic demeanor. "If we do this, we do it right, and we share all responsibility for how this unfolds. Are you prepared for that burden?" "More than ever," she answered, feeling the weight of the challenge yet also a strange exhilaration. "This is bigger than me. I don't wish to shoulder it alone, I want to share this journey with all of you." In that instant, a rush of self-liberation surged through her. This was no longer just about her story, it was about co-authoring a new narrative with those whose lives had intertwined with her own. Yet, a lingering darkness remained. Every reassuring feeling was matched by a fear, the thought that her efforts could be met with resistance, hostility, or even indifference, fracturing everything she hoped to build. What lay ahead loomed immense and terrifying. Would they truly embrace the challenge of confronting their narratives, or glimmering beneath the surface, would they remain shackled to their fears? As she contemplated the road ahead, doubt appraised her determination. The real test awaited. Could she master the art of leading through conflict, or would she crumble beneath the weight of division? Sarah drew a deep breath, feeling the chill of anticipation settle into her bones. She had taken a leap, but the ground beneath her was far from certain. Would the next step solidify her role as a transformative leader, or would they be marked by regret from an untimely challenge? The days following Sarah's proposal rippled through the council like a ripple in a still pond. Each member grappled with her ideas in silence, yet she could sense the burgeoning conversations that brewed outside the council chamber, whispers of doubt and curiosity. Despite her growing anxiety, she held firm to her conviction that she had ignited a necessary dialogue, a chance for growth through discord. As she sat at her desk, preparing the framework for the working groups, her fingers hesitated above the keyboard. This was more than just logistics, it was about trust and vulnerability, two commodities very much in demand within the council. She knew that not everyone would welcome her vision with open arms. But did she fully understand the breadth of the storm she invited? Drawing a breath, Sarah's determination solidified. She had to anticipate the pushback and mitigate it effectively, not just for herself but for the faces staring back at her during the meetings. She envisioned future encounters, the heated debates that would ignite, creating a chasm rather than bridging one. Her mind drifted to Lisa, the woman with the nervously fidgeting necklace. Lisa was a longtime council member who had seen the community's issues from the inside out. Her voice was pivotal. Sarah needed to recruit her support, yet she also understood that overcoming Lisa's inherent reservation would be a careful negotiation. Later that week, Sarah reached out to Lisa, inviting her to coffee at the local cafe. As they settled into a corner booth, the warm aroma of roasted coffee enveloped them. "You seemed skeptical during the meeting," Sarah began, meeting Lisa's gaze directly. "I'd love to hear your thoughts more fully." Lisa stirred her drink, apprehensive eyes fixed downward. Sarah, the scars of our past are deep. History can be painful to revisit, and people may not respond well when asked to reassess their narratives. I get it, Sarah responded, grounding her voice in empathy. But isn't that precisely why we need to engage? What if through this process, we help people understand one another better? We can't move forward if we ignore the past. Lisa's eyes softened, but doubt lingered within them. What you're suggesting sounds idealistic. People might just dig in their heels, especially those who feel attacked or misunderstood. You could end up creating more division. Yet that very challenge lit a spark within Sarah. Perhaps, but I want to create safe spaces for that very conflict to emerge. If we're prepared, we can channel that friction into growth. I want your voice in these discussions. You command respect, and your insights could guide us to navigate those rough waters. The corner of Lisa's mouth ticked upward, indicating interest but veiled skepticism. You know this endeavor could cost you personally if it does spiral out of control. Then let it be my cost, Sarah said, her resolve hardening. I can't let fear dictate our choices. I'll be here to catch the fallout even if it's heavy, but together, we can make it manageable. Lisa paused, a flicker of acknowledgement igniting in her eyes. If you're that committed to this, I might consider helping, but I can't promise I won't raise concerns during the sessions. They need to be addressed. Sarah nodded, feeling both relieved and invigorated. Addressing concerns is exactly what we need. With your insight, we could create a foundational framework for everyone. It's about building a platform rather than reinforcing divisions. Conversation flowed deeper, and Lisa began to articulate points that resonated with Sarah's visions, providing perspectives she hadn't considered. The layers of uncertainty began to peel away, revealing how crucial dialogue could be to making real progress. As they wrapped up their discussion, Sarah felt lighter, as if a burden she didn't know she was carrying had been lifted. However, doubt still lingered just outside the edges of her periphery. Would other council members realize this opportunity for growth, or would they remain entrenched in their positions? Being deeply involved meant risking everything: her trust, her ambitions, and perhaps even her standing. Arriving home, Sarah was met with a troubling thought. As she stared out at the flickering streetlights, a question emerged, echoing louder than the rest. How would she handle the inevitable moments when her leadership was put to the test? Determined resolve took root within her. Whatever lay ahead was yet to be unveiled, but one truth was clear: the time had come to face the unknown consequences of her actions. Would she emerge a stronger leader, or would she stumble where others had failed? Tomorrow, she would take the first step to propose the working groups at the next council meeting. But this time, she would be fortified with the knowledge that transformation was a chaotic process, and she needed to prepare for the consequences, the good and the bad. The meeting would be only the beginning of a tumultuous journey. Would her courage hold against the challenges that awaited her in the council? Sarah felt an anxiety that was both thrilling and daunting. The unfolding truth was just around the corner, and its revelation would shape not only her professional identity but also her personal convictions. As Sarah entered the town hall for the council meeting, a wave of familiarity washed over her, yet it felt entirely different from the last time she had stood here. The air was thick with a mix of anticipation and apprehension, but there was a newfound clarity in her purpose. No longer just an extension of her grandmother's legacy, she had transformed into a formidable advocate and agent of change for herself and her community. The council chamber was filled with the same faces, yet they seemed to carry the weight of their stories more openly now. As she took her seat, Sarah felt the shift in the atmosphere, a palpable tension hinting at the discussions to come, conversations that might bridge their pasts to an uncertain future. She glanced toward Lisa, seated among the skeptics, and noted the slight nod she received as a sign of solidarity. It was a mutual understanding that they were embarking on a multifaceted journey together. The mayor called the meeting to order, the microphone crackling to life as he began to address the members and attendees. Sarah felt her heart begin to thump in her chest, a drumbeat of urgency fueling her conviction. She opened her folder, the very blueprint for their discussions resting on the table in front of her, but her thoughts quickly raced back to the many late nights spent developing this framing. As the session unfolded, the time came for her to speak, another juncture between past fears and present aspirations. "Thank you, Mayor," council members, and community members for allowing me the space to share our vision regarding the Legacy Forum, Sarah began, her voice steady and clear. As I hope we all recognize, stories possess the power of transformation, a capacity to reshape how we understand one another's experiences. The unfamiliar sound of her confidence made the words resonate with an authenticity that had been absent before. What had started as an idea whispered in her mind now burst forth, filling the room with a passionate energy. She laid out the framework for the working groups, meticulously designed to address every concern voiced in previous meetings. She outlined mechanisms for conflict resolution, safe spaces for dialogue, and formats for storytelling that invited growth. As she spoke, Sarah caught sight of Lisa nodding, her interest visibly piqued as they delved into the dynamics of addressing historical tensions. The council members began to engage, sharing apprehensions alongside hopes, a far cry from the resistance that had initially shadowed her vision. Sarah knew they were beginning to appreciate the multi-threaded tapestry she had described. The collective histories were as vital as her own. The mayor interjected, bringing forth the pivotal question: how can we ensure the different narratives don't lead to divisions but rather foster understanding? By fostering a culture of empathy, one where we openly ask questions and actively listen to challenging perspectives, Sarah countered passionately. We must recognize that even disagreement can hold beauty within it. It invites dialogue rather than distance. The energy shifted palpably. Pensive expressions on the council suggested they were on the brink of grasping the transformative potential of their endeavor. Discussions started sparking among members, exchanging insights and personal anecdotes that began to weave the fabric of their shared journey. In that moment, Sarah realized her concerns had morphed into something profound: acceptance. She wasn't just advocating for her grandmother's legacy but championing her community's right to embrace their multifaceted histories. Every story shared, every struggle acknowledged, bridged gaps that had long been untended. As the meeting approached its conclusion, a humble smile spread across Sarah's face when she heard the mayor say, "Let us schedule the first forum. It's time to allow our community to speak." Her heart soared. Validation washed over her. Not only had she proposed a radical shift, but they were embracing it, ready to navigate this freight of historical narratives together. The aftermath would undoubtedly provoke a discussion of complexities and hidden truths, but beneath all that lay the promise of growth. In that transformative moment, the uncertainty that once loomed over Sarah like a shadow had evaporated, replaced with a luminous sense of accomplishment. The echo of fear paled in comparison to the exhilaration coursing through her. Sarah stood not merely as a participant but as a significant figure advocating understanding and change, a co-creator of a narrative that could elevate not just herself, but her entire community. As she exited the town hall, the cool air greeted her like a dear friend, the clarity of her path now undeniable. She had not only confronted fear, she had forged a connection that transcended her understanding of identity, the realization that her purpose extended beyond personal achievement. She had stepped into her power, honoring her grandmother's legacy with a fierce dedication to ensuring every story was woven into the tapestry that held their community together. With a deep breath, Sarah embraced the exhilarating chaos ahead, understanding that true transformation was not merely about reclaiming her history, it was about inviting others to reclaim theirs, as well. This was her moment of achievement, fortified by a community enriched through shared vulnerability and timeless tales. Sarah had become a steward of change, a true champion of personal growth, embracing the beautiful complexity of her journey, ready to lead others through their own stories. Now it is your turn to take action. You must subscribe immediately to the channel to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can aid your own journey of transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, making sure more people can find inspiration from these compelling narratives. Comment below with your own reactions and theories about Sarah's journey, sharing what you would have done differently. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who you think need to hear this conclusion. Your support can ignite change.